You're very welcome to the Woman to Woman show here on Confident Women Ireland's YouTube channel with me, Roisin the Cleric. And we are joined once again by the one and only Mary Curren. Mary Curren is Ireland's leading and most experienced life, business, and leadership coach. And also, there's so much to Mary's bow in change management, everything. So, Mary is also the author of the book When You're Ready to Life Begins When You're Ready to Listen. Mary, you're very welcome back. Today, you want to talk about a very, very interesting topic that many women and mothers experience is the empty nest syndrome.
Yes, we said we'd talk about that today, Roisin. Yeah, and I suppose it's something that has entered my life at my stage, and I know it has entered yours as well. It's happening at the moment for you. So yeah, the empty nest syndrome. There are three stages that people go through, when they, experience the empty nest syndrome. So you have grief, then you have relief, and then you have joy. So starting off with the grief, it's like any grief. People realize, you can suffer grief, of course, from somebody dying, but you can also suffer grief from relationships breaking up and the loss. But you also can suffer grief from losing your home. It's as big a loss as it is losing a significant other. And then lastly, you can suffer grief when your family leave, when your children leave the nest, So I often work with people and coach them on the acronym for grief, which I call SARAH, SARAH. So S is for sadness, A is anger, then we move into reality, and then after reality, acceptance takes place, and then healing. But it takes time, and the one thing people must realize for everybody going through the empty nest syndrome, some of them will suffer more grief than others. It depends on their relationship with their children. It depends on how close you were before they left the nest. And also the other grief can be the loss of being needed anymore, the loss of feeling, what happens now? I've no purpose, the loss of purpose. So there's a lot of losses there, not just losing your children because of moving on and going on in life. It's like you're losing stuff, you're losing your identity, or you're becoming aware. I've always been identified as such a one's mother. Where's my identity gone? So it can be a realization with that grief as well. So that's the
Yes,
first area.
and I think that is something too with many parents, which we're going to talk about at the end, that here in Ireland, especially over the last, say, 15 years, our children are not just getting up, going to school, doing the leaving cert, going to college and flapping their wings. They're coming back home. They're saving for mortgages. They're saving for a deposit of the house. They're saving even for deposit for rent, the lack of rent or accommodation. But we'll talk about that at the end.
Mm.
So in the empty nest syndrome, mothers, whether you're working from home as a full-time mother or part-time mother, or you have a full-time job, you're still are the main caregiver in the home, not just physically and emotionally and mentally and financially, but you're also taxi of mom. You're also the coach, whether cook, and you're also the cook, the cleaner, and that emotional support. And not all mother, and that is something that's very crucial, is when you're the mother giving all that you have no time for yourself, and then all of a sudden your children have done the leaving cert and they're off to college. And a lot of parents go, oh, I never realized the empty nest syndrome was real.
Yes, I think also though the mother is not being needed as much anymore, and when you feel not needed, you can feel very isolated, and that happens in the first part of the grief. It's like I'm not needed anymore. So then it makes you realize, and when I coach somebody, I'll be asking them to look at their needs now because your needs shift and change as you
Yes.
develop, and so does your values. So the needs that were fulfilled once by your children are not being fulfilled anymore. And you need to realize you don't need to continue fulfilling needs that are not needed anymore. So it's a two-way track for both the mother realizing I'm not needed, what's my purpose now? And the fact that you internally yourself emotionally need to examine, what are my needs now that my children have left the home? What are my needs? What are my values? And what am I going to do about it? And I find that's where some women emotionally get very down and very depressed. And, you can get this because you feel I'm not needed anymore. I've worked with people that said, Mary, I've no purpose anymore. Now, the other part that comes into the grief can be, it highlights how your relationship is should you have a significant other. And for some people, when the children leave the empty nest syndrome, or empty nest, or the nest, when they leave it, sometimes they realize, the mother realizes all of a sudden, what's my relationship like with my significant other? We haven't been out for ages on our own. And now what have we to talk about? We always talked about the children. We talked about the schools. We talked about everything to do with the children. And that's very much why when I'm coaching couples, I encourage them to have date nights all throughout their life, from the time they're together to the end, because I have coached so many people that tell me they don't know each other's significant other when the children leave the nest. They don't know each other.
Yeah.
They have to start all over again in their relationship.
And that can be very challenging.
It can be very challenging. They can suffer from the grief and the loss of children gone, and they might be getting that now with their significant other. So they have to sit down and talk about all of that. So that moves us into acceptance and relief, which is the second stage. So when they go through the first stage and they acknowledge that they're suffering from some grief, or they just feel the need to relook at their life, reset their life, then you come to the area where you work with them or coach them on the area of, what are the things you can accept about this? What's good about this? Get them to realize this is an opportunity, not just for your children to learn and grow on their own, but it's an opportunity for you to move up and realize, what are my needs now? It's time for self-care. It's time for self-compassion. And when you work with them and they realize, it is an opportunity, it's not a disaster. Then, as you know, in coaching, we are reframing their situation, and that's where the relief comes in. To realize it's not so bad. Like, I know I've work to do on myself. I've work to do with my significant other, if you have somebody. But it's really about getting to know yourself again, because
Yeah.
a lot of us live our lives through our children.
Yeah.
And it's very easy to do that and fall into that. Very easy. When we have, as you know, as a working mother, and as I've always been a working mother, you do need to hold on to your identity and who am I, and realize when they've left, be happy for them, but realize I have an opportunity now to start again going through the wheel of life and looking at, what hobbies do I want to take up, what new people do I want to meet. The one thing mothers are very good at, we usually do keep our friends, because some of our friends kids are going to the same school, so we do have some friends there that will be going through the same stage as we are, in the empty nest syndrome. Their kids have moved out as well, so you have a lot in common. But sometimes it offers an opportunity to meet different people, or for you to take up a new hobby. And some people go back to college. I know one woman that went back to college when her kids left the nest.
So let's bring me back to grief. What is the stages of grief in the empty nest syndrome, and what solutions or advice would you give to letting go and allowing the grief and letting go and getting over the grief stage?
Well, the sadness is the first, because remember, joy and sadness, and that's why joy is left at the end, because joy and sadness are intertwined. I mean, they're so connected. There's part of them really sad. That's the beginning. That's the acronym for grief. Sadness is the first one. I mean, they're sad, like they're happy, but they're sad. So at the beginning, in the grief area, they're not able to see the positives. They're not able to go at that time when they're sad, at that moment, into it's a new opportunity. They're not able to go that quick. So you need to stay with your emotions when you're sad. Accept your emotions. Stick with them. Honor them. And let them go and feel them, and do mindfulness, and let yourself feel the emotion of sadness, at the beginning. So sadness is the first one. Then anger. Now, when you talk about anger in the empty nest syndrome, you're talking really about anger sometimes on reflection of, I could have been a better mother. You can get angry with yourself. You can get angry. You can get angry with, they've gone now, and maybe I could have done more. they're gone now, and maybe I shouldn't have been so direct with them, or maybe I shouldn't have been so controlling with them. So the
Or
answer,
I might not have to be so giving them everything. I'm
another one,
being
yeah,
I'm giving them too much and too much and too much where I've nothing left for me.
that is so true. And that turns around to anger with thyself. You're angry with yourself
Yeah,
for doing that. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And that's the one thing I do notice. Mothers especially will actually write out a list of, and it's a very good exercise to do when the children leave this in, the nest. It's very good to write out, what am I angry with myself as a mother? What am I angry with? I was coaching this woman, and she had suffered from only recently the empty nest syndrome. I said, Mary, I'm angry with myself. I was too tough on one of them in particular, but she was. And she said, but I have learned to forgive myself now. She's at the end of it. But she was saying, I was angry with myself at times because I didn't see it before it happened. So we have all this anger built up as well. So that's the second stage. Then you go into reality, and this is where you need to spend time accepting, I cannot undo the past. I cannot undo what I've done. All I can do is take charge of now in the present reality and realize, I'm going to accept what has happened in the past. I'm going to be self-compassionate towards myself, and I'm going to accept my reality now.
Do you
That's,
think
yeah.
so? Is there another focus of what we did wrong as parents rather than what we did right as parents? And is that a societal thing too?
That's a very good question, Roshan. The mind itself, the brain always defaults to the negative to protect us. So you're absolutely right. When I ask people to write out 10 things that empower them, they could sit there for 20 minutes to find 10 things that would empower themselves about themselves. But if I ask them to write down, what are you angry with yourself? What are you annoyed with yourself? They can do it in seconds. So you're absolutely right. We will think about what did we do wrong before we'll think about, well, let's look at this from the other side. What sort of a mother was I?
Mm.
Like, what sort of a relationship did I have with my children? What are the positives that came out of our relationship together?
And
Has
what
my,
did I have to do to
yeah.
provide for my children, to provide the home? What did I do for my children?
Well, that's a very good question for true readers.
Yeah,
Mothers go into two ways there, to go into giving, and forgetting about themselves. But the
I
other
did that.
one is, and I learned because I did it. I don't think I'm ashamed of it, but I did miss
No,
out.
I'm not.
I missed out on one or two opportunities because I heard myself say at the time, no, sorry, they're the nights I have my son, and they're the nights, that's really special to me. So I'm going to say no to that invitation.
Yeah,
So we did miss out on things as mothers. We did, but it's part of our journey. And it's what we unconditional love comes with the territory
it
when you have
does, doesn't
children.
it?
I
And
remember
that's,
thinking
yeah,
children introduced me to the world of unconditional love. Because up until you have a child, I don't realize you realize
you don't.
how much unconditional love we have for our children.
And children don't realize the unconditional love of a parent or as a mother, especially a mother. Because a
Yeah.
mother, the baby goes inside your womb, that miracle of being a mother, that
Yes.
most miracle. And then I remember at the moment I gave birth to my children, I go, how did they breathe inside my womb? How did they live? But anyway, getting back to point. So I think too, there's, we have to celebrate what we did as a parent and not always look at the negatives of what we did wrong, what we could have done better. Because
Yeah.
most mothers they will go above and beyond for their children.
Yeah. Yes.
And it's that unconditional love. They would go without to give their children.
Yeah.
And celebrating that. But that grief of your children leaving is also a new opportunity for you as an individual.
Yes, and that only comes, so when we're doing the Sarah Ackerman, once acceptance comes into reality, the next step then, so it's sadness, anger, reality, acceptance, and then healing. So
Yeah.
once you accept where I am now, I've worked on what I gave to my children, what I'm proud of, what am I less proud of. Like you have to balance it out and
Yeah.
see what things you could have done better. We all can learn. Because to me, as you know, reflection, how we learn is reflection on our experience. So it's kind of reflecting back on what we did well and what went well and what we could have done better. It's good for us as well to accept that and not
Yes.
beat ourselves up, not to
If
beat
you,
ourselves up.
yeah, if you were given anybody watching this, what three pieces of advice would you give to mothers with or fathers with empty nest syndrome? But we are Confident Women Island, so our focus is to women and mothers. What three pieces of information advice would you give in overcoming grief?
I've gone through a lot of grief through family members myself, so it has been a challenging, let's say, journey for the last 3-4 years. I think what three things would I give them in overcoming grief? Well, the first thing in grief is you need to allow yourself to affect your emotions. You need to allow yourself to feel sad. You need to cry when you need to cry. Give yourself permission to. Don't apologize for crying, because I know grief can affect you where you're laughing 1 minute in a crowd and you could be crying that night at home. So that's the one I'd say, accepting. That's the one. Accepting and then moving on. Not saying you're forgetting about the people or the fact that kids have left the nest, but just accepting it, and being able to say it's a new beginning. Because with grief comes a new beginning.
Yeah. And for grief, what's so accepting, allowing, and feeling the emotion and acknowledging the emotion is
And
very key.
self-compassion.
And
Self-compassion.
self-compassion. And it's a process, isn't it? It's a process of going through the grief.
Well, I don't think you can end at resilience unless you go through self-compassion. You've got to have self-compassion to build yourself up and to be able to say, I can get through this. I can get through the stage of time where there's nobody around anymore, and I'm not having any conversations with my children because they're busy out having a great time, and
They're
maybe,
making their own life.
but
They're making their own life, the big
yeah,
world, thinking
yeah,
that they know everything and
yeah,
they know it all. And
yeah,
sometimes it's just
yeah.
allowing that to happen, giving them that gift
Yes. But
of the open
yeah.
world.
And I think that's the end in the three stages is the joy. When you start realizing and being happy for them, and when they ring you and say, Mom, I'm off on a holiday to whatever, being delighted for them and being able to say, this is a time for me to relax and to realize they're now on their own trajectory and they're doing whatever they want to do. And it's kind of like saying, let them on with it, and not, yeah, because we can with that joy and acceptance is wonderful, but we can, as mothers, be a little selfish sometimes. I even find myself, if I don't hear from my son, I say, you didn't ring me this week, what's wrong? And like I've learned not to do that because
I
in
don't think that's
everybody's life, there's
selfish.
different rules as regards, and you know this, Rose, I shouldn't assume, but I know you know this because we've done it in coaching, the rules we live our lives by. And in families, there are rules that are different to another person's family. And with us, with friendship, we have rules and tolerations and boundaries. But we also, one member of your family, one of your children could say, Mom, I'll ring you every week. Mostly it's usually girls that do that. Mum, I'll get in touch with you every week. And I know you have a boy and a girl, so you have both. And I have a lot of nieces, and I know from talking to my relatives, like they're very good at checking in. They're very good at, Mum, don't worry, wherever I am, I'll still send you a WhatsApp or whatever. Then you have boys. And at the beginning, I found it difficult when my son left the nest because I said, you didn't ring me this week. You didn't ring me. And I realized, stop it, Mary. You are actually annoying him. Like he obviously has a rule in his mind that he rings me when he feels like it. He calls out to see me when he feels like it. Now, of course, we arrange certain celebrations together, but it's like the live, like you have to let them have their own rules about life. And with friends, I can meet a friend I haven't seen in 6 years walking down the road, and we'll go for coffee as if it was yesterday.
Yes,
And then
yes.
I have friends that I see every week or every month or whatever. But I know one particular girl, and she is a friend of mine. But if I didn't ring her at least once a fortnight, she'd be on the phone. Mary, what's up? You didn't ring me. What's going on? So we do have different types of relationships with our children as well.
Yeah,
So
that's
that joy
key.
is great, but we need to not annoy them as well.
But I don't, are we too hard on ourselves as mothers? Oh, we're being selfish. Is that another part where we're being too hard on ourselves? You know,
I think sometimes being human, I think some mothers can be a little selfish at times. We can. I always think about manipulation, and people are straight away say, "Oh, I never manipulate anybody," but we're all human, and sometimes, you know, I remember one time I really, really, I was like telling my son I loved him so much because he had white blonde hair and I was at a picnic and he was running through the grass or whatever. And I said to him, I don't want you to grow up. You're just gorgeous the way you are. I stay the way you are forever. And you know what he said to me? He said, Mom, don't be so selfish. Of course I'd grow up. I remember thinking how he was telling me I was selfish. And it was so funny the way he said, don't be so selfish. Of course I have to grow up. And I just thought, wow, do mothers sometimes be selfish, you know? And you know what? It was an endearing remark. I mean, I loved him as he was there. Of course, I realized he has to grow up. And of course, someday he's going to leave the nest. But I just think, are we as mothers, we can in that time, I suppose, be a little.
I think, in my opinion, I think mothers are more selfless than selfish. In my experience and in my opinion, we're more selfless than selfish.
Mhm.
It's just the social narrative now that mothers are selfish and children know it all and children have everything. But what about, mothers have needs as well. So I can understand that mothers do have needs. And, it's nice for a child. I remember my mother did it, my father did it. No, we did phone our parents, and I think that was a part of appreciation of, what we did, thank you, mommy, checking in to see that you're okay.
Yeah.
I'm checking in because you're always checking in to see if I'm okay, but I'm checking in to see if you're okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's why I mean, everybody, we all have different relationships with our
Yeah.
children. And no two parents would have the same relationship with, the
No,
children either.
no,
Even like if there's a mother and father, they might, or whatever, the partner and a significant other, they mightn't have the same relationship.
no.
It's different, as you know, different temperaments, different personality styles. So
It is.
all of us will get on different with our children. Yeah.
And I think that's true. So the grief is, as you said, accepting it, allowing it,
Yes. Yes. Yeah. And
and giving
yeah,
yourself that time of that change, that transition from being a mother to the children flying the nest and freedom for yourself. That
in
comes in the joy part.
Yeah, that comes in with the joy, the freedom. All of a sudden, you realize I don't have to double check this. I don't have to stay longer at this because I don't have to do it anymore. Now, but with that, as you know, comes the sense of loss of purpose. That's why we need to look at, you need to gain purpose in different ways after they leave the nest. You need to have new hobbies. You need to be meeting new friends or whatever it is for you, just to give yourself independence as as a person comes back in. You're more independent, you're more free when the children leave the nest. And, as we know at the moment, as you said earlier, I mean, I know one woman in particular, and she said, my son is back with me. And she goes, I'm delighted in one way. And in another way, I'm going, it's been different because they had left the nest and they came back. And
That
they're
was me. Yep.
and like they can be 27 and 30. And like I know, like when I started work, I was 18, I had my own place. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
oh well, yeah, 18, 20, yeah. And like, and I think it's difficult too when they're living at home when they're back there because they've been out and they've come back. Some of them have been gone and then they've come back. And it can be very difficult for the mother, father, and the child that has come back. It can be a strain. It can be a challenge.
I think too, when children go back home, it's like respecting that they are moving back home. So
Yeah.
there's something too that the younger ones need to understand is when they go back home, you know, it's the parents' home, it's the mother's home.
They need
And
respect and they
they
need
need to respect,
boundaries
and there has to be the
and boundaries.
boundaries there.
Well, I would have worked with someone and she had no boundaries for when, and I'm talking about somebody I know now, when her son came back, she had no boundaries. At the first, she was just delighted he was back. But after a few weeks, she realized, oh my God, he's taking advantage of this, he's emptying the fridge, he's doing this, whatever. And we talked about, and I worked with her on looking at what she was tolerating and what she was going to set boundaries around. And
Yeah,
she actually went a step further, and she actually asked him to contribute because now he is working since he came back. He's been working, but she asked him to contribute. She didn't want a huge amount, but she wanted it in validation for the fact, he could be in an apartment in Dublin, and I think it's 1,200, 1,500 a month. So a small contribution was just placing her value for
And
her.
that's just 12.50 or plus a month. I think it's gone up to nearly 2 grand now in Dublin.
Yeah,
And that's just for the apartment. That's not for the if they live in an apartment, the management, the bins.
yeah,
That's not the internet. That's not electricity. It's not gas. It's not
yeah.
any. That's not food. It's
No.
not cleaning. So so yeah. So I suppose it's that joy.
Hmm.
But so we have the grief.
With the
So I'm
grief.
going to start the
Yeah,
grief. We've gone through grief,
yeah,
and as you said, the emotions, the
yeah,
relief.
yeah.
How can women get from grief to relief?
When they start making a list of what they'd like to do now, what hobbies would they like, and all of a sudden they start appreciating and being grateful for the new space.
Hmm.
Start to be grateful and appreciating. It's a new era. It's a new time for me to look at my life, look at what I am interested in and my hobbies, and move on from there. It's kind of that's where it's a relief. I mean, we all know when we commit to bringing children into this world, it's a contract, like for life, and sometimes when they move out of the nest, it's a relief in ways. It's a relief. You don't have to do as much washing, you don't have to do whatever. It's a relief when you accept. That's why grief comes first, then acceptance, accepting and healing comes after that. But once you come into your reality and accept it, you definitely get a sense of freedom and a sense of relief.
I mean, it's knowing that reality and, knowing and not being, having the delusions. Oh, I have to stay in grief and staying in that emotion of grief. And it's about that relief is like, it's that change. It's changing, and we all have to go through the change, bringing change management into our personal lives, bringing that change and accepting that there's a change. Or sometimes people just embrace it. Whoa, they've gone to college, yippee! Or they've moved out. Absolutely brilliant. So they can actually, the house is clean. I used to be really, really, really OCD in the house. Now it's like, oh my God, do I have to even dust anything? But and I remember it was when I was doing my NLP coaching, and the trainer said, I said, I can't. I was late because I had to clean the kitchen because the kids didn't clean the kitchen after breakfast. And she said, can you say that the worktop is messy because the people you love are there? And I went, no, because if they love me, they would tidy up after themselves. If they appreciate it, mom has to get out. Because sometimes we give too much that
Yeah.
we forget who we are, we forget our identity, we forget that we have a life. As
Well,
you
I agree with you, Roshi, so much there. And how you find out what did you give too much of is when you check in with yourself and you ask yourself, what do I hear myself say I am? Am I too generous? Am I too gentle? Am I too good of a listener? Am I yeah, any of those, or am I too independent?
is my kindness my weakness?
But that's what I was going to say. That's what you run it by. The template I have is where, okay, so let's say you said to me, Mary, I'm too kind, okay? So you move into the next area and you say, okay, what type of people do I not like? And you immediately will say, well, I don't like people that aren't kind because I find I'm too kind at times. But then you go into the downfall of being too kind. Because remember, every competency, every skill we have, if you overdo it, it becomes a negative. So what would you say if you're too kind? What's the downfall in that, Roshi? When you're too kind, what's the downfall?
You end up being empty. You end up resenting uh, being taken for granted.
Yeah, you become resentful because you realize people are taking you for granted, etc. So then you coach the person on to how can you continue being kind while having boundaries? No, the action would be, so how can you continue being kind without going to the extreme? So how can you pull back a bit? So you might say, okay, I'm going to continue being kind while having boundaries around my time. I'm going to continue being kind by having boundaries around what I share with others.
And finances too with your children. Children are very good at giving the emotional blackmail when they want something. So it's
Yeah.
having the boundaries with where the finances are too.
Yes, yes, you could have a boundary around that as well. Yeah, having a boundary, because that's what we need to do sometimes, because some of us do too much of certain things. And then what happens is we get taken for granted. Like if you're too loyal, the biggest downfall can be that you go from being too loyal to the part where you kind of collide with the person. You go with them and you agree and you sweep everything under the carpet. That's the extreme of being loyal. So we could collude. Collude is the word I was looking for. Yeah. So that is very true. They're very good at playing with your emotions, children.
Even when they become adults now, with the
Yeah.
change, because if you look, society has changed from when we grew up.
Yes. Yes.
Society has changed, and the expectations from children, from parents to children, and children to parents, societal expectations have completely changed.
Yes.
And it's like there's a completely different rule book now. It's like everything's about the children. I can understand that too, but that goes back to our Irish culture, going back to the mother and baby homes, going back to all that.
Yeah.
So where it also comes down, I think, good parenting and the joy is finding, well, I did the very best I could with my children and more
At that time.
at that time. But you see, at that time, I still have issues with that. I did the very best I have with what I had.
At the time.
You cannot, at that time means you didn't do well. Instead of just saying, I did the very best with what I had and what resources I had
Mhm.
and what I had.
Mhm.
And with saying that at that my time means there's sort of, well, if
Well,
you had
it's
to
funny,
be better.
Roisin. I think we can see it in two different ways because when I was working with somebody recently, she actually said more or less what we're saying. I did the best I could do with my children. However, she had difficulty with one child, grown up adult now, and she said, Mary, I've learned so much more. I have learned many, many skills on how to deal with children that I did not have when I was a young mother with this particular child. But now I know, looking back, I did the best I could do at that time. So it gives her a consolation.
But that's where wisdom comes in, knowledge.
Yeah, yeah, because it gives her a consolation. And I would not have interrupted her saying that because I really know that I know it was someone I was working with and I knew what she'd gone through and what she had done. And I know now she knows an awful lot, as you said, with wisdom and skills that she has learned. She definitely, looking back, would believe if she was to do it again, which she's not going to do, but if she was to do it again, she would do it differently. So I think for some people, Roisin, being aware now in the present moment of the wisdom you have and what you've learned as skills as a mother and everything, it gives you
Experience.
a consolation for people like that. That's why I understand why people will say, well, at the time, I didn't have the skills, I didn't have this, I didn't have, but I did my best. I did my best at the time because,
I think we underestimate, especially here in Ireland, I think it's a culture thing. We're always self-deprecating. We're always saying oh, and instead of celebrating what we've done, and you know what, embracing what we've achieved as mothers, and accepting and acknowledging that. I often think the Irish society is always, we're putting ourselves down. We're blaming ourselves for things that society and marketing and psychologists are trying to, some, not all, are trying to plant on women
yeah,
because it suits the narrative. But
yeah,
I think the joy comes in saying, for me, and I think something we should accept is the joy. The mothers, we give that unconditional love.
yeah, yeah.
That no, and I think when you have it, when you give birth and you have that baby and you hold that baby that first time, you're like a love protecting her cubs,
Yes, yes.
you know.
It's a beautiful moment. It is. I mean, I remember one time, anyway, I'd won an award for something, and somebody actually immediately interviewed me and asked me, so what is the best achievement you've ever had in your life? And I think at the time, the thought I was going to say the award I'd just won. And I went, No, the best achievement in my life would be giving birth to my wonderful son,
Mm.
and I think she was a little bit taken back, but that to me, that was the best achievement.
Yeah,
Just for, well, I can't speak for all mothers, but for me,
yeah.
bringing him into life, um, yeah, it was definitely the best achievement for me because I nearly lost him towards the end. So it was really a huge
Oh
achievement.
no.
Yeah, yeah,
Nobody really nobody knows what everybody's going through. Nobody knows what life experiences and challenges and struggles that
yeah.
people have had to overcome in their personal lives and as being a parent and bringing the family up. And I think that has to be accepted within the joy of the empty nest syndrome.
Well, I think with the joy comes the release of judgment on yourself. And I'd like to
Yes.
say that very strongly because we are we are our own worst critics. And as you said, it would be easier to write down what we didn't do well as a mother, far easier to write that down than the miss and as you said, celebrate what we did really well as a mother. So I mean, judgment of ourselves really brings us down, and it's the opposite to joy, really. I mean, nobody wants to be judged. And as you said, all the mothers out there, there's wonderful mothers out there, and you'll get the opposite as well. But you focus on what your life is full of and what you want. You know what I mean? So you'll find beautiful people out there. You'll find beautiful mothers out there, and it's about the joy is it's a wonderful gift to bring a baby into this world.
And
It's
I
a,
think it's a wonderful thing to actually be able to, uh, is as a mother, it's about giving your children those life skills. So when you got the empty nest syndrome, the children are leaving home, and and you're safe in that knowledge that your children have the life skills that they need to actually survive in the
yeah,
world. And I use the word survive very, very intentionally because, first of all, you have to go out and survive in the world. So then the first of all is going out there, surviving. It's surviving your first month's rent. It's surviving paying all your bills. And
yes,
after you survive the first couple of months of getting into the new habits of
yeah,
paying your bills and looking after yourself, then it is actually acknowledging, you know what, my parents, how did they do all this? How did they pay the bills? There's all them hidden things. So when you give your children the life skills of being able to cook for themselves, do their laundry,
yeah.
and getting into the habits of the of of utilizing and putting into action all those life skills that your mother has given you, and you're watching your children sort of use all those life skills that you've given them to go out in that world. And you know that you're at the end of the phone, or the door's always open for them to come home. And you always know as a mother, if a phone rings at 3 o'clock in the morning, they're either crying they broke up with their boyfriend or something like that. You may not have heard them in 6 months, but they phone you up. What's
Yeah,
wrong? Oh, Baba.
yeah,
You know that.
yes.
So it's about the life skills. I think in the joy stage, the relief and the joy stage is celebrating as a mother the life skills that you have, the independence, this knowing them to link into their personality, of their own emotions and their mindset, their emotions and their actions, which is their character.
And also their values, because remember, children form their needs and values from their parents. And I'm not saying that as they get older, they might change them, but I definitely do think if they are demonstrated by the parents or by the mother or whatever, and really strong values of respect, values of for whatever, that would be along with their life skills. That would come
Yeah,
with, and they will have the same value for themselves. So when they have their own values for themselves, it means that they will be able to, as you said, start off by surviving and moving into thriving when they get on. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like, because I know different families have different values and different families. And I'm not mixing up religion with values, but I know certain people, certain families, certain children that grow up are brought up with certain values, and then others are brought up with different values and different religions. So it's to respect all of that. But we know, as you said, once the mother knows they're going out there with the skills that they need, the life skills that they need, knowing that they're capable and respected and they know what values are, they'll go a long way.
yeah. And that they once you give your children the skills of self-confidence to confidently live in the world that we're living in, that is the most wonderful gift a mother's given her children.
Yeah.
And that's something you can celebrate in the joy stage of the empty nest syndrome.
And I think, thank God, that has only really come about in the last, whatever, 30 years. There was one stage with the old traditional way of living was don't blow your own trumpet, don't be talking, don't be praising yourself. Like there was all these negative messages given to kids.
Is that the Irish culture?
That was the Irish, I'm done with the Irish culture, yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas now that's all gone. Like I see them around me. And even now, the new generation of parents, I mean, it's lovely to see. They encourage you. When something goes wrong, I love to see it. The parent doesn't attack them there and then, which they would have done in the past in front of others, so it didn't matter. They would say, need to talk to you about what happened there. We'll talk to you later. Their communication with their kids is different for the better, all for the betterment, and we are building, as you said, that self-confidence in them from the beginning, which
I know my parents gave me those skills.
gave you loads of skills.
They gave me those skills of self-confidence. And, we had, when we lived in Africa and Saudi Arabia, we had stables and we had a groom. My mother said, you want responsibility of the self-confidence. You want horses? Well, then, even though we had a groom living down above the stables, you get up at 6 o'clock before school, you go down and you muck out the horses and you feed the horses. And then after school, you come up, get a shower, go to school. Then when you come home, you go out and exercise the horses.
Very good. That's really, really good. That's giving you all those skills of
Responsibility,
taking responsibility,
being accountable,
discipline.
discipline.
Yeah, these are all the concepts of a leader. Discipline is one of them, determined is another one, but what I'm hearing there, that they're brilliant skills, and brilliant
I
resource.
say, I think that's something, when you look back, you go, okay, well, how have we become a society where we blame our parents for everything? Oh, I remember somebody saying to me, oh, what kind of birth did you have for your child? And I go, oh, I had a good birth. Oh, and it's, oh, but how were you in your pregnancy? There's all those kind of questions. Are we has society become too much of blaming the parents for everything instead of saying, celebrating my parents? My parents did this for me. My parents did that for me.
Yeah,
I'm so grateful for what my parents have given me. It's those skills of understanding the life skills. The biggest gift you can give your children is the love, unconditional love, but also teaching them that there is boundaries in life. Don't overstep boundaries because there's a big world out there. You are accountable and responsible for your own actions.
Yes.
Instead of blaming your parents for anything that goes wrong in your life. Oh, that's my parents.
Yeah, no, I agree with you.
A lot of psychologists are blaming parents for everything.
Well, I would not agree with that.
No.
Absolutely not, because even parents that do get it wrong, sometimes like all of us, because we're normal, I'm convinced we never do it out of intent. If we get something wrong, it's not out of a bad intent.
We all do. We're human. We're human.
It's just human. Yeah. So, I mean, I think the intention of any parent is to give unconditional love and everything to their children. That's the joyous intention, and that's all we want to do, really and truly. So if things go wrong, it's life. It's life.
And if you know what, okay, things went we'll learn. It's the positive learning. It's that positive learning. And also I think, when you have that empty nest syndrome, there's also a different relationship with your children.
Yes, you do. Yeah.
Because they're becoming adults now. And I think children need to also understand that there's a different relationship with their parents when they leave the nest.
And then an even more beautiful relationship when they become parents themselves.
Yeah.
Because we've seen it many times in the age group I'm in, where the parents, the children that left the nest is now parents themselves. And by heavens, do they appreciate their parents that bit more? They really do. They always say that when your children grow up and they become parents, that's when they really appreciate their parents.
Yeah. And I think it's like that circle of life.
Yeah.
They're flapping their wings, that empty nest syndrome, and you just have to. It's like the birds, and then that's where the when you think the even the name, the empty nest syndrome, you often see birds, watching the little chicks fly the nest
That's
and
right. Yeah.
seeing them coming back
Yeah.
and then going again and they're watching them. And that the empty nest syndrome, you have to allow your children to fly the nest. You have to allow them to make their own life
Right.
lessons.
Yes.
And
Yes.
that is the biggest gift I think a parent can have, is not, my son calls it helicopter parents, you
Very
know,
good. Yeah.
is giving your children that, even though if they go away at 16, knowing that they have all the skills, tools, self-confidence that they have, that you've given them
Mm.
within them, and the values, as you said. And sometimes when your children leave home, they decide they don't want their parents' values, that they want
Oh,
to
yeah.
find
Yeah.
out their own values.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the other thing that's really, really important, and somebody said it to me, it wasn't something I came up with, but they said, Mary, we cannot learn, like the expression was, learn for our children. We can't learn for our children.
No,
We cannot. And sometimes when you try and make an attempt to tell them something, even they're not interested. They
yeah,
need their own freedom to make up their own minds in their own way. And that is what's called on us, to give them that freedom to do that is really
mm,
important. We can't learn a lesson for another child.
no.
No.
You have to, I think that's a gift. And that's where that come, that joy is, you can, I think I always feel like I was blessed. I had my children young, well, 25 and 29.
Yeah.
And I was old compared to my friends, even though they all went to university and everything. Up north, we tend to have our family younger.
Right. Right.
And that was a different. We've always known that, us Northerners, that we had our families much younger than the Southerners.
Right. Okay.
But I
Yeah.
always think, that I know when my children grew up, I gave up everything. I was a divorced mother, parenting alone with everything. Their father didn't even send a Christmas card or a birthday card for them. You're there. So, as I said, all different situations. Nobody knows the life situations or circumstances behind every family. And you're very welcome to Woman Show here on Confident Women Ireland's YouTube channel with me, Roisin the Cleric. And we are joined once again by the one and only Mary Curren. Mary Curren is Ireland's leading and most experienced life, business, and leadership coach. And also, there's so much to Mary's bow in change management, everything. So, Mary is also the author of the book When You're Ready to Life Begins When You're Ready to Listen. Mary, you're very welcome back. Today, you want to talk about a very, very interesting topic that many, many women and mothers experience, is the empty nest syndrome.
Yes, yes, we said we'd talk about that today, Roisin. Yeah, and I suppose it's something that has entered my life at my stage, and I know it has entered yours as well. It's happening at the moment for you. So yeah, the empty nest syndrome. There are three stages that people go through, when they, experience the empty nest syndrome. So you have grief, then you have relief, and then you have joy. So starting off with the grief, it's like any grief. People realize, you can suffer grief, of course, from somebody dying, but you can also suffer grief from relationships breaking up and the loss. But you also can suffer grief from losing your home. It's as big a loss
Mm.
as it is losing a significant other. And then lastly, you can suffer grief when your family leave, when your children leave the nest, So I often work with people and coach them on the acronym for grief, which I call SARAH, SARAH. So S is for sadness, A is anger, then we move into reality, and then after reality, acceptance takes place, and then healing. But it takes time, and the one thing people must realize, for everybody going through the empty nest syndrome, some of them will suffer more grief than others. It depends on their relationship with their children. It depends on how close you were before they left the nest. And also the other grief can be the loss of being needed anymore, the loss of feeling, what happens now? I've no purpose, the loss of purpose. So there's a lot of losses there, not just losing your children because of moving on and going on in life. It's like you're losing stuff, you're losing your identity, or you're becoming aware. I've always been identified as such a one's mother. Where's my identity gone? So it can be a realization with that grief as well. So that's the
Yeah,
first area.
and I think that is something too with many parents, which we're going to talk about at the end, that here in Ireland, especially over the last, say, 15 years, our children are not just getting up, going to school, doing the leaving cert, going to college and flapping their wings. They're coming back home. They're saving for mortgages. They're saving for a deposit of the house. They're saving even for deposit for rent, the lack of rent or accommodation. But we'll talk about that at the end.
Mm.
So in the empty nest syndrome, mothers, whether you're working from home as a full-time mother or part-time mother, or you have a full-time job, you're still are the main caregiver in the home, not just physically and emotionally and mentally and financially, but you're also taxi of mom. You're also the coach, whether cook, and you're also the cook, the cleaner, and that emotional support. And not all mother, and that is something that's very crucial, is when you're the mother giving all that you have no time for yourself, and then all of a sudden your children have done the leaving cert and they're off to college. And a lot of parents go, oh, I never realized the empty nest syndrome was real.
Yes, I think also though the mother is not being needed as much anymore, and when you feel not needed, you can feel very isolated, and that happens in the first part of the grief. It's like I'm not needed anymore. So then it makes you realize, and when I coach somebody, I'll be asking them to look at their needs now because your needs shift and change as you
Yes.
develop, and so does your values. So the needs that were fulfilled once by your children are not being fulfilled anymore. And you need to realize you don't need to continue fulfilling needs that are not needed anymore. So it's a two-way track for both the mother realizing I'm not needed, what's my purpose now? And the fact that you internally yourself emotionally need to examine what are my needs now that my children have left the home? What are my needs? What are my values? And what am I going to do about it? And I find that's where some women emotionally get very down and very depressed. And, you can get this because you feel I'm not needed anymore. I've worked with people that said, Mary, I've no purpose anymore. Now, the other part that comes into the grief can be it highlights how your relationship is should you have a significant other. And for some people, when the children leave the empty nest syndrome or empty nest or the nest, when they leave it, sometimes they realize the mother realizes all of a sudden, what's my relationship like with my significant other? We haven't been out for ages on our own. And now what have we to talk about? We always talked about the children. We talked about the schools. We talked about everything to do with the children. And that's very much why when I'm coaching couples, I encourage them to have date nights all throughout their life, from the time they're together to the end. Because I have coached so many people that tell me they don't know each other's significant other when the children leave the nest. They don't know each other.
Yeah.
They have to start all over again in their relationship.
And that can be very challenging.
It can be very challenging. They can suffer from the grief and the loss of children gone, and they might be getting that now with their significant other. So they have to sit down and talk about all of that. So that moves us into acceptance and relief, which is the second stage. So when they go through the first stage and they acknowledge that they're suffering from some grief, or they just feel the need to relook at their life, reset their life, then you come to the area where you work with them or coach them on the area of, what are the things you can accept about this? What's good about this? Get them to realize this is an opportunity, not just for your children to learn and grow on their own, but it's an opportunity for you to move up and realize, what are my needs now? It's time for self-care. It's time for self-compassion. And when you work with them and they realize, it is an opportunity, it's not a disaster. Then, as you know, in coaching, we are reframing their situation, and that's where the relief comes in. To realize it's not so bad. Like, I know I've work to do on myself. I've work to do with my significant other, if you have somebody. But it's really about getting to know yourself again, because
Yeah,
a lot of us live our lives through our children.
yeah,
And it's very easy to do that and fall into that. Very easy. When we have, as you know, as a working mother, and as I've always been a working mother, you do need to hold on to your identity and who am I? And realize when they've left, be happy for them, but realize I have an opportunity now to start again going through the wheel of life and looking at what hobbies do I want to take up, what new people do I want to meet. The one thing mothers are very good at, we usually do keep our friends, because some of our friends kids are going to the same school, so we do have some friends there that will be going through the same stage as we are, in the empty nest syndrome. Their kids have moved out as well, so we have a lot in common. But some